I stared at my brother Jake's text message while sitting alone in my Manhattan penthouse on New Year's Eve, the words burning into my retina like acid. Don't come to New Year's Eve. My fiancée is a corporate lawyer at Sullivan and Cromwell. She can't know about your situation. My parents agree. The takeout Chinese food grew cold in front of me as the ball dropped on television celebrating a year that had brought me everything except the one thing money couldn't buy: my family's respect. I typed back, "Understood," with trembling fingers, not knowing that in 72 hours his precious fiancé would walk into my boardroom and discover exactly who I really was. The follow-up call came at midnight right as fireworks exploded across the city's skyline. My mother's voice crackled through the phone, slurred from champagne and shame. "Randy, honey, you have to understand Jake's position." She began using that apologetic tone I'd heard my entire life. "Amanda doesn't know about your troubles. Jake told her you're living in subsidized housing, struggling to make ends meet." I gripped the phone tighter, watching reflections of celebration lights dance across my floor-to-ceiling windows. My troubles. You know, the homeless thing. Living in your car during college. Jake's built this whole story about how you never recovered, how you're still barely surviving on government assistance. The irony hit me like a physical blow. Here I stood in a penthouse worth $12 million, CEO of Richardson Holdings, a private equity firm I'd built from absolutely nothing into a company worth $800 million. Yet my own brother was telling his fiancée I lived in poverty. "Mom, you know that's not true anymore." But it was true, Randy. We all remember those awful years. Those awful years. When I was 12 and our father walked out the door with nothing but a duffel bag and a promise to send money that never came. When Mom worked at the diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then cleaned office buildings until midnight, coming home with swollen feet and defeat in her eyes. Jake had been the golden boy then, the high school quarterback with the bright future. Every spare dollar went toward his equipment, his camps, his college applications. When I graduated valedictorian from our tiny Nebraska high school, the celebration lasted exactly one evening before the conversation turned back to Jake's football scholarship opportunities. I got into University of Chicago. I reminded her the old wound reopening. Full academic scholarship. But you dropped out. Because you needed the money for Jake's law school applications. The truth hung between us like a blade, because his scholarship only covered tuition, not living expenses, because someone had to sacrifice their dreams. I'd lasted 2 years at Chicago before the financial reality became impossible. Student loans covered tuition, but not housing, not food, not books. I'd started sleeping in my beat-up Honda Civic during the brutal Chicago winters, studying by streetlight, showering at the campus gym before they opened each morning. The car smelled like desperation and old fast food. I'd stuff my clothes into garbage bags, rotate between 3 parking spots to avoid security, and pretend to be a normal college student during the day. At night, I'd curl up in the back seat with every piece of clothing I owned piled on top of me, trying to stay warm enough to sleep. You could have asked for help. Mom said the same defense she'd used for 20 years. I did ask. You said Jake's future was more important because he was almost finished with law school. He was our best hope for success. Jake graduated from a mid-tier law school and landed a position as a junior associate at a small Manhattan firm, making $65,000 a year. Meanwhile, I dropped out of college and moved back to Nebraska, working the night shift at a truck stop gas station. But while Jake was learning to draft contracts, I was teaching myself finance, economics, and investment theory using library books and free internet at the local community center. I'd saved every penny from that gas station job living in Mom's basement and eating ramen noodles for dinner. When I'd accumulated $5,000, I moved to New York with nothing but a suitcase and a hunger that scared people. The first year was brutal. I worked as a receptionist at a small investment firm during the day and cleaned office buildings at night. But I watched, listened, and learned. I studied every deal that crossed the desk, memorized market patterns, and absorbed the language of high finance like a sponge. When I finally made my first investment recommendation to a client, it returned 38% in 6 months. Word spread quickly in the tight-knit financial community. Within 2 years, I'd scraped together enough capital to start my own firm. Richardson Holdings began in a tiny office in Queens with second-hand furniture and a borrowed computer. But I had something my competitors didn't, the absolute certainty that I would never be poor again, never be vulnerable again, never depend on anyone else's choices for my survival. Jake's always been ashamed of where we came from. Mom continued, her voice getting smaller. He wants Amanda to think we're respectable people. And I'm not respectable. You know what I mean, Randy. The homelessness, the dropping out, the struggle. It doesn't paint a pretty picture for a girl from Amanda's background. I'd done my research the moment Jake started dating her seriously. Amanda Patterson, Harvard Law Review partner, track at one of the most prestigious firms in the country. Old money family from Connecticut Trust Fund, summer house in the Hamptons. Everything Jake had always wanted to be associated with. Everything he thought our family wasn't good enough to deserve. So you're both pretending I don't exist? We're protecting Jake's happiness. This girl could be his whole future, Randy. Don't you want that for him? I wanted to scream that I'd built an empire while Jake was still paying off law school loans. I wanted to tell her about the deals I'd closed, the companies I'd saved, the hundreds of jobs I'd created. But the pain in her voice stopped me. She was ashamed of me, too. I understand, I said quietly, ending the call before she could hear me cry. But as I sat in my empty penthouse watching the city celebrate below, I realized something that chilled me more than any winter night in that Honda Civic. My brother hadn't just denied my existence. He'd actively rewritten our family history to erase my success and preserve his own fragile ego. And tomorrow I'd have to pretend that was okay. My phone erupted at 7:30 on New Year's morning with the distinctive ringtone reserved for emergencies. David Turner, my general counsel, never called unless Richardson Holdings faced imminent destruction. Randy, we have a massive problem. David's voice carried the controlled panic of a man trying not to hyperventilate. Meridian Corporation filed for a hostile takeover at close of business yesterday. The paperwork hit the SEC at 11:59 p.m. on New Year's Eve. I bolted upright, immediately alert despite 3 hours of sleep. Meridian. The industrial conglomerate. The same. They're offering shareholders $42 per share for complete acquisition of Richardson Holdings. Our stock had closed Friday at $38. A $4 premium might tempt enough shareholders to hand over control of everything I'd built. Who's representing them? Sullivan and Cromwell. Lead attorney is Amanda Patterson. The name hit me like ice water. I set the phone down for a moment, staring out at the Hudson River, while my brain processed connections that seemed too coincidental to be real. Randy, you still there. Tell me everything you know about Amanda Patterson. Harvard Law Review corporate specialist, been with Sullivan and Cromwell for 8 years. Reputation for aggressive tactics and creative legal strategies. She's never lost a hostile takeover case. I pulled up Amanda's professional profile on my laptop. The photograph showed a polished blonde woman in her early 30s, sharp blue eyes, confident smile. Everything about her screamed old money confidence and Ivy League superiority. David, when did Meridian first start showing interest in Richardson Holdings? Our intelligence suggests they've been building a position for about 4 months. Started buying small blocks through shell companies in September. 4 months. Jake had met Amanda 5 months ago at some trendy Manhattan bar, according to his excited phone calls describing his new girlfriend. The timeline made my stomach turn. I need everything you can find on Amanda Patterson's personal life, financial records, property holdings, relationship history, and I need it today. Randy, it's New Year's Day. Most of our investigators are... Pay them triple. This is not a drill. I hung up and immediately called Marcus Chen, the private investigator Richardson Holdings kept on retainer for sensitive corporate matters. Marcus had spent 15 years with the FBI's white-collar crime division before starting his own firm. If anyone could uncover the truth about Amanda Patterson quickly, it was him. Marcus, I need a full background investigation on Amanda Patterson, attorney with Sullivan and Cromwell. I need it fast and I need it thorough. What level of investigation are we talking about? Level 5, full financial, personal, professional, and relationship history. Cross-reference everything with Meridian Corporation and any employees or executives. Look for any connections to corporate espionage, insider trading, or industrial sabotage. Level 5 investigations cost $50,000 and produced results that could end careers. Marcus had never failed to deliver exactly what I needed to know about people who pose threats to my company. Timeline: 24 hours. That's expensive even for you. Bill me $100,000. I don't care what it costs. While Marcus worked his magic, I spent the day reviewing everything I knew about Meridian Corporation. They specialized in acquiring undervalued companies, stripping them for parts, and selling off the pieces. Their CEO, Marcus Webb, had a reputation for ruthless efficiency and zero sentimental attachment to employees or company culture. Richardson Holdings would be perfect for their business model. We owned significant real estate in Manhattan, had profitable subsidiary companies, and maintained a cash reserve that would fund their next 3 acquisitions. They could fire 70% of our employees, sell our headquarters building, and liquidate our smaller holdings for an immediate profit of $300 million. But the timing bothered me. Meridian had to have inside information about Richardson Holdings' quarterly performance, our expansion plans, and our cash position to make such a precisely calculated offer. That information wasn't public. Someone with intimate knowledge of our operations had been feeding them intelligence. By evening, Marcus called with preliminary findings that confirmed my worst fears. Amanda Patterson met your brother Jake Richardson at Balthazar Restaurant on August 15th. But here's the interesting part: she'd been eating dinner there every Tuesday night for 6 weeks before he showed up. She was hunting for him. Gets better. 3 days before they met, Amanda's assistant made a reservation at Balthazar for her usual Tuesday table. But Amanda also had her assistant research the restaurant's customer database, looking for regular patrons with the last name Richardson. My blood ran cold. She knew exactly who he was before they ever spoke. There's more. Amanda's credit card records show she's been making unusual purchases over the past 4 months. Medical supplies, pharmaceutical equipment, and she's been visiting a private clinic that specializes in addiction treatment. Addiction treatment. The kind of place that provides prescription medications to people who don't necessarily need them for legitimate medical reasons. I thought about Jake's recent behavior changes. The mood swings, the increased aggression toward me, the paranoia about our family's reputation. I'd attributed it to wedding stress and his natural insecurity, but what if something else was influencing his mental state? Marcus, I need surveillance on Amanda and Jake immediately. Audio, video, everything. And I need blood work analysis if you can manage it. That's crossing into illegal territory, Randy. Then we'll stay just inside the legal boundaries. But I need to know what she's doing to my brother. The next morning brought more devastating news. Marcus had spent the night conducting deeper research into Amanda's background, and what he'd discovered painted a picture of calculated deception that went far beyond a simple hostile takeover. Amanda Patterson isn't her real name, Marcus reported during our emergency meeting in my office. Her birth name is Amanda Kellerman. She's changed her identity twice in the past 10 years. He spread photographs across my desk showing the same woman with different hair colors and styles, different names on legal documents, different professional credentials. She's done this before. At least 3 times that I can confirm. Always targeting family-owned businesses, always through romantic relationships with male relatives of the primary decision-maker. 2 of those companies ended up in bankruptcy after hostile takeovers. One of the men she manipulated committed suicide. The room felt like it was spinning. I gripped the edge of my desk trying to process the scope of Amanda's operation. She's a professional corporate assassin. That's exactly what she is, and Jake is just her latest weapon. I stared at the photographs, seeing my brother's future written in the faces of other men who'd trusted Amanda Kellerman, men who'd believed they were special, chosen, loved, men who'd destroyed their own families to protect a woman who saw them as nothing more than useful tools. Marcus, how much time do we have? The shareholder vote is scheduled for January 8th. If Amanda can convince enough board members that Richardson Holdings is unstable or poorly managed, she wins. Meridian takes over, strips the company for parts, and walks away with $800 million. And Jake, based on her previous patterns, once she gets what she wants, she disappears. Jake will be left with nothing but the knowledge that he helped destroy his own sister's life's work. I looked out the window at the city I'd conquered through pure determination and decades of 18-hour workdays. Somewhere down there, my brother was being systematically destroyed by a woman whose profession was turning family love into corporate weapons. But Jake had made his choice. He'd chosen to believe the worst about me, to be ashamed of our family's struggles to prioritize his social status over our relationship. Amanda hadn't created his resentment, she'd simply weaponized it. The question now was whether I could save him without destroying everything I'd built to escape our past. Marcus's surveillance team worked with surgical precision, embedding listening devices in Jake's favorite restaurants and monitoring Amanda's communications through legal corporate intelligence methods. What we discovered over the next 48 hours shattered any remaining illusions about Amanda's motivations. The recordings were devastating. Jake's so pathetically easy to manipulate. Amanda's voice crackled through the hidden microphone in her Sullivan and Cromwell office. I crushed 2 Ativan tablets into his wine during dinner, and he tells me absolutely everything about his sister's business operations. My hands shook as I listened to her conversation with a colleague, the casual cruelty in her tone, making my stomach turn. She was describing my brother like a laboratory animal, cataloging his responses to her psychological experiments. The anxiety medication makes him more talkative and less suspicious, she continued. Plus, he thinks his memory problems are just wedding stress. It's actually quite brilliant. Her colleague's voice joined the conversation. How long have you been drugging him? 3 months. Started with small doses to test his reactions, then increased the amount once I confirmed he was susceptible. The steroids were a nice touch too. I convinced him they were vitamin supplements for wedding preparation. Now he's aggressive enough to fight with his sister, but too confused to question my motives. I had to pause the recording, bile rising in my throat. Jake's recent anger, his violent mood, swings his paranoid accusations about my jealousy. It was all chemically induced. Amanda had been systematically altering his brain chemistry to make him a more effective weapon against me. The beauty of this approach, Amanda's voice continued when I resumed playback, is that Jake genuinely believes he's protecting our relationship from his sister's interference. He has no idea he's giving me everything I need to destroy Richardson Holdings. Marcus sat across from my desk, his expression grim. There's more. These recordings are from yesterday afternoon. He played another file, this one capturing Amanda's phone conversation with someone identified in our system as Marcus Webb Meridian Corporation's CEO. The brother has provided copies of all the family financial documents, Amanda reported, including Richardson Holdings' original incorporation papers, early investor agreements, and personal financial statements from when Randy was homeless. Excellent. How's his mental state? Deteriorating on schedule. The combination of Ativan and testosterone supplements has made him increasingly paranoid about his sister. He's convinced she's trying to sabotage our wedding because she's jealous of his success. Webb's laughter was cold calculating, and he has no idea his sister is worth $800 million. None whatsoever. I've maintained the fiction that she lives in subsidized housing and works odd jobs. Jake actually feels sorry for her, which makes his resentment even stronger. He thinks she's a burden on the family's reputation. What about the family meeting you mentioned? I'm sending Jake to confront Randy this weekend. I've given him a script about how her jealousy is threatening our happiness. The steroid-induced aggression should make the confrontation particularly explosive. My blood turned to ice. Amanda wasn't just manipulating Jake. She was orchestrating a family destruction that would leave him completely isolated and psychologically broken. The timeline is crucial, Webb continued. We need the hostile takeover to appear justified by family instability and poor leadership. If Jake publicly attacks his sister, it supports our narrative that Richardson Holdings is managed by an emotionally unstable CEO. Already handled. I've been photographing every document Jake brings home, including personal letters and family photographs. We have enough material to paint Randy as mentally unfit for corporate leadership. The recording ended, leaving my office in suffocating silence. Marcus closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, studying my face for reactions. "There's more evidence," he said quietly. Credit card receipts showing Amanda's purchases of pharmaceutical supplies, video surveillance of her crushing pills into Jake's drinks, and phone records proving coordination with Meridian dating back 6 months. 6 months? I looked up sharply. Jake said they met 5 months ago. Amanda was researching your family and building her psychological profile of Jake for 4 weeks before their first accidental meeting at Balthazar. She knew his favorite restaurant, his typical schedule, and his emotional vulnerabilities before she ever spoke to him. I stood up and walked to my window, looking down at the streets where normal people lived normal lives without corporate assassins targeting their families for destruction. The weight of realization was crushing. Amanda hadn't fallen in love with Jake and then discovered his connection to me. She had specifically targeted him as a weapon against Richardson Holdings from the very beginning. Marcus, what's Jake's current condition? Based on the dosages Amanda's been administering, he's experiencing significant cognitive impairment, emotional volatility, and short-term memory loss. The combination of benzodiazepines and anabolic steroids is particularly dangerous. If she increases the doses much more, he could suffer permanent brain damage or cardiac arrest. She's willing to kill him. Based on her previous cases, Amanda Kellerman has no emotional attachment to her targets. If Jake becomes more useful, dead than alive, she'll arrange his death and frame it as suicide caused by family stress. I thought about my brother probably sitting in his apartment right now, confused and angry, and completely unaware that the woman he planned to marry was slowly poisoning him to death. The same brother who'd told me not to come to New Year's Eve because I was an embarrassment to the family. "What's our legal position?" I asked. "Complicated. Amanda's been careful to operate within legal boundaries regarding the corporate espionage. The drugging is definitely criminal, but proving it requires Jake's cooperation, which we're unlikely to get given his current mental state. And if I try to warn him..." Amanda's anticipated that possibility. According to the recordings, she's prepared Jake to interpret any accusations against her as evidence of your jealousy and mental instability. She's told him you'll try to destroy their love with fabricated evidence. I was trapped. My brother was being systematically destroyed. My company was under attack, and the woman orchestrating everything had constructed the perfect psychological cage. Any attempt to save Jake would be interpreted as an attack on his happiness, pushing him further into Amanda's control. But there was one element Amanda couldn't control: timing. The shareholders' meeting was scheduled for January 8th, just 4 days away. If I could survive until then, without Jake's cooperation, I might have one opportunity to expose Amanda's manipulation in front of witnesses who couldn't be chemically influenced. "Marcus, I need you to continue surveillance and document everything. Audio, video, financial records, pharmaceutical purchases. Build me a case file that would convince a federal prosecutor. And Jake..." I stared at my reflection in the window, seeing the exhaustion and fear I'd been hiding from everyone, including myself. Jake made his choice when he decided to be ashamed of our family's struggles instead of proud of our survival. I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. Jake was my little brother, the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd cried when I left for college, who'd called me every week during his first year of law school because he was scared he wasn't smart enough to succeed. Amanda had turned that scared, insecure boy into a weapon against his own family. But underneath the drugs and manipulation, my brother was still in there somewhere. I just had to figure out how to save him without destroying everything I'd built in the process. I drove the 5 hours to Nebraska in my Range Rover, watching the landscape transform from Manhattan skyscrapers to endless cornfields as I prepared for what might be my final conversation with Jake. Marcus had tracked his phone to Mom's house, where he'd been staying since taking a sudden leave of absence from his law firm. According to Amanda's recorded instructions, Jake was supposed to confront me about my jealous interference in their relationship using talking points she'd provided to maximize emotional damage. She'd essentially programmed him to attack his own sister using pharmaceutical manipulation and psychological conditioning. I'd brought copies of all the recordings, hoping that hearing Amanda's true voice might break through the chemical fog clouding his judgment. It was a desperate plan with almost no chance of success, but I couldn't let my brother marry a woman who was slowly killing him without at least trying to save his life. The rusty anchor hadn't changed in 20 years. Same red vinyl booths, same smell of fried onions and coffee that had been sitting too long, same collection of local farmers and truckers who'd been eating breakfast there since before I was born. Jake sat in our old corner booth, the one where we'd shared countless meals during high school, but everything about him looked wrong. His face was puffy and flushed, his eyes darting around the restaurant like he expected an attack from every direction. The confident, charming man I'd seen at family gatherings had been replaced by someone who looked paranoid and unstable. Amanda's chemical manipulation was written across his features in swollen tissue and erratic behavior. "Jake," I said quietly, sliding into the booth across from him. He looked up with immediate hostility, his pupils dilated and unfocused. "What do you want, Randy?" "I want to save your life." "From what?" "From finally being happy, from having someone who actually loves me instead of judging me all the time." His voice carried an edge of aggression that wasn't natural for Jake. In 28 years, I'd never heard him speak with such casual violence, even during our worst arguments. The steroids Amanda had been feeding him were transforming his personality in real time. "Jake, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Amanda has been drugging you." "Here we go." He laughed bitterly, exactly as Amanda had predicted he would. "I told her you'd try something like this. You can't stand seeing me successful, so you're going to make up lies about the woman I love." I pulled out my phone and queued up the recording of Amanda discussing her manipulation strategy. "This is her voice, Jake, recorded in her office 3 days ago." But before I could hit play, Jake's hand slammed down on the table with shocking force, making every dish rattle and drawing stares from other customers. "I'm not listening to your fake evidence, Randy. Amanda warned me you'd try to fabricate recordings to break us up." "How did she know I'd have recordings unless she was doing something worth recording?" "Because you're predictable. You've always been jealous of anyone I cared about. First Sarah in high school, then Jennifer in college, now Amanda. You can't stand that I found someone better than our trashy family background." The words hit me like physical blows, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't really Jake talking. This was Amanda's programming combined with chemical influence designed to make him as hurtful as possible. "Jake, look at yourself. When's the last time you remember feeling completely clear-headed? When's the last time you slept through the night without anxiety? When's the last time you felt like yourself?" His hand moved to his temple, rubbing at what was obviously a persistent headache. For just a moment, confusion flickered across his face, like he was trying to remember something important, but couldn't quite grasp it. "The wedding stress," he mumbled. "Amanda says it's normal to feel confused before a big life change." "What wedding stress? You've been planning this for 2 months. What's stressful about marrying someone you love?" "You wouldn't understand. You've never had anyone love you enough to marry you." Another perfectly crafted insult designed to hit my deepest insecurities about being alone. Amanda had done her research, thoroughly identifying exactly which emotional buttons would cause maximum damage to our relationship. "Jake, please just listen to 30 seconds of this recording. If it doesn't sound like Amanda's voice, I'll leave and never mention this again." But instead of agreeing, Jake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh screech that silenced the entire restaurant. His face was red with rage, veins bulging in his neck as the steroid-enhanced anger took control. "You're pathetic, Randy. Absolutely pathetic. You've spent your whole life being jealous of me because I'm everything you could never be. Successful, respected, loved. Jake, you're a junior associate making $65,000 a year. I'm the CEO of a company worth $800 million. Liar." His voice rose to a shout, making several customers reach for their phones. "You work odd jobs and live in subsidized housing. Amanda showed me the public records. You're exactly what you've always been, a failure who destroys everything she touches." The disconnect from reality was so complete that I finally understood the depth of Amanda's psychological manipulation. She hadn't just drugged Jake. She'd created an entirely alternate version of reality, where I was still homeless and he was the successful sibling. She'd built him a fantasy world where attacking me was justified by his superior status. "Jake, call Richardson Holdings right now. Ask to speak to the CEO. They'll put you through to my office." Richardson Holdings. He laughed with genuine confusion. "What are you talking about?" He literally didn't know I owned a company. Amanda had so thoroughly controlled his information sources that my professional success had been completely erased from his understanding of reality. I tried a different approach, pulling up news articles about Richardson Holdings on my phone, showing him photographs of me at corporate events, displaying my Wikipedia page with my biography and net worth. But instead of processing the information, Jake's face contorted with rage as he swatted the phone out of my hands, sending it skittering across the floor. "Fake news, photoshopped pictures. You probably paid someone to create a fake Wikipedia page just to trick me." The paranoia was so deep that no amount of evidence could penetrate it. Amanda had conditioned him to reject any information that contradicted her version of reality, creating a psychological defense system that turned truth into further proof of deception. "Jake, I'm begging you, don't marry her. She's going to destroy you." "The only person who's ever tried to destroy me is you." He moved toward me with a predatory stance that made my body flood with adrenaline. Jake had never been physically aggressive in his entire life, but the combination of steroids and psychological conditioning had turned him into someone I didn't recognize. "You've spent our whole lives trying to drag me down to your level," he continued, his voice getting louder and more threatening. "But I finally found someone who sees my worth, someone who loves me for who I really am." "She doesn't love you, Jake. She's using you to attack Richardson Holdings. She's been feeding you drugs for months to make you easier to manipulate." "Shut up." The words came out as a snarl, and suddenly Jake lunged across the table, grabbing the front of my jacket with both hands. The strength in his grip was unnatural, enhanced by the steroids Amanda had been giving him. He pulled me halfway across the table, his face inches from mine, spittle flying as he screamed. "You're going to leave us alone, Randy. You're going to stop spreading lies about Amanda. Stop trying to ruin my happiness. Stop being the same pathetic loser you've always been. Jake, please." He shoved me backward with shocking force, sending me tumbling into the adjacent booth. The elderly couple sitting there scrambled out of the way as I crashed into their table, sending coffee cups and plates flying. The entire restaurant erupted in chaos. 2 truckers jumped up to restrain Jake, who was still advancing on me with murderous fury in his chemically altered eyes. The waitress was calling the police while other customers backed away from what looked like a genuine psychotic break. "Stay away from my fiancée!" Jake screamed as the truckers held his arms. "Stay away from our wedding. Stay away from our life. You're nothing, Randy. You've always been nothing, and Amanda sees right through your jealous, pathetic act." Through the crowd of people trying to calm him down, Jake's eyes met mine one last time. For just a second, I saw a flicker of the brother I'd grown up with, confused and scared and lost. But then the chemical haze reasserted control, and his face hardened back into programmed hatred. "I never want to see you again," he said with cold finality. "You're not my sister anymore. You're just another obstacle Amanda and I had to overcome." The police arrived as I was picking pieces of broken coffee cup out of my jacket, and Jake immediately began telling them how I'd been stalking and threatening his fiancée exactly as Amanda had coached him to do. The truckers who'd witnessed the entire incident told the truth, but Jake's version was so detailed and convincing that the officers looked at me with suspicion. I drove back to New York in complete emotional numbness, understanding finally that my brother was beyond saving. Amanda had turned him into a weapon so precisely calibrated for my destruction that even presenting him with absolute proof of her deception only made him more dangerous. But as I crossed the state line back into civilization, my phone buzzed with a text message from Jake's number. "The sister took the bait exactly as you predicted. Phase 2 can proceed on schedule." Jake hadn't sent that message. Amanda had his phone, and she was letting me know that everything that had just happened was part of her plan. The confrontation, the violence, the public scene, it was all orchestrated to create evidence that I was mentally unstable and dangerous. And in less than 48 hours, she'd use that evidence to destroy everything I'd built. The Richardson Holdings boardroom had never felt as imposing as it did on January 8th, when the future of everything I'd built would be decided by 12 people in expensive suits. I'd arrived early to review my presentation one final time, knowing that Amanda Patterson had spent months preparing for this exact moment. The mahogany conference table stretched 30 feet down the center of the room, surrounded by leather chairs that had witnessed dozens of crucial business decisions over the past decade. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Manhattan, 40 stories below where normal people went about their lives without knowing that a corporate war was being decided in the clouds above them. David Turner sat to my right, surrounded by legal documents and financial projections, while our investment banker Patricia Huang reviewed the latest market analysis on her laptop. We'd spent the weekend preparing counter-arguments to every possible attack Meridian might launch, but Amanda's access to intimate family information gave her weapons we couldn't anticipate or defend against. "Remember," David whispered as board members began filing into the room, "the goal is to maintain confidence in leadership stability. No matter what she throws at us, stay calm and factual." But my palms were sweating as I watched the door, knowing that my brother would walk through it at any moment, completely unaware that he was about to witness his sister being destroyed with ammunition he'd unknowingly provided. At exactly 10 o'clock, the Meridian Corporation team entered like a military formation. Marcus Webb led the group, his silver hair and custom-tailored suit radiating the kind of old money authority that intimidated investment committees. Behind him came a team of analysts and lawyers, each carrying leather briefcases and expressions of absolute confidence. And then Amanda walked in, stunning in a navy blue dress that probably cost more than most people's cars, her blonde hair perfectly styled, and her blue eyes scanning the room like a predator, identifying prey. On her arm was Jake, wearing his best suit and beaming with pride at being included in such an important business meeting. My heart shattered watching him. Jake looked healthy and confident, clearly having no memory of our violent confrontation 3 days earlier. Amanda had probably adjusted his medication to ensure he'd be charming and presentable for today's performance, hiding the psychological damage she'd been inflicting for months. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus Webb began, "thank you for allowing Meridian Corporation to present our acquisition proposal for Richardson Holdings." The next hour unfolded like a precisely choreographed execution. Webb outlined Meridian's track record of successful acquisitions, their financial capacity to complete the deal, and their strategic vision for Richardson Holdings' future growth. Everything was professional, polished, and completely legitimate on the surface. Then Amanda stood up and the real attack began. Before we discuss financial projections, she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that commanded immediate attention, "I believe the board should understand some concerning information about current leadership stability." She activated the room's presentation system, displaying a slide titled Leadership Risk Assessment that made my stomach clench with dread. Our due diligence investigation has uncovered significant concerns about CEO Randy Richardson's fitness for corporate leadership. The first slide showed photographs of me from my homeless period taken somehow from social media or family albums. Images of me sleeping in my car, looking exhausted and desperate, eating cheap food from convenience stores. Pictures I'd forgotten existed now, blown up on a 70-inch screen for board members to examine like evidence in a criminal trial. Ms. Richardson has a documented history of financial instability, including a period of homelessness during her college years. Amanda continued smoothly. While this information was not disclosed in her corporate filings, our investigation suggests a pattern of poor decision-making that continues to this day. Jake sat beside her, nodding along supportively, having no idea he was watching his sister's professional assassination. Amanda had positioned him perfectly, using his presence to legitimize her attack while keeping him ignorant of the true nature of what was happening. Furthermore, Amanda clicked to the next slide, we've discovered evidence of ongoing psychological instability that manifests in erratic behavior toward family members and business associates. The new slide displayed police reports from our confrontation in Nebraska, carefully edited to suggest that I had initiated the violence. Photographs of the damaged restaurant witness statements describing my aggressive and unstable behavior, and medical records showing Jake's injuries from our altercation. Just 3 days ago, Ms. Richardson physically attacked her own brother in a public restaurant, requiring police intervention and hospitalization of the victim. I looked at Jake, whose face showed confusion as he tried to process this version of events. Amanda had clearly altered his memory of that day, probably through increased medication, making him believe he was the victim rather than the aggressor. The attack occurred when Mr. Richardson attempted to discuss concerns about his sister's jealousy regarding his engagement. Amanda continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Ms. Richardson has apparently been unable to accept that her brother has found happiness with someone she considers beneath their family's social status. The twisted irony was breathtaking. Amanda was accusing me of the exact classist snobbery that had actually motivated Jake's initial shame about our family background. Our investigation suggests that Ms. Richardson's inability to maintain stable personal relationships extends to her business dealings as well. She clicked through slides showing employee turnover rates, terminated partnerships, and failed negotiations, all presented without context to suggest incompetent leadership rather than normal business fluctuations. The pattern is clear, Amanda concluded. Richardson Holdings is led by someone whose personal instability poses a significant risk to shareholder value and company operations. Board member Robert Chen raised his hand with obvious concern. Ms. Patterson, these are serious allegations. How do we know this information is accurate? Amanda smiled with perfect confidence. Mr. Chen, I wouldn't present this information without absolute verification. In fact, we have a witness who can personally attest to Ms. Richardson's unstable behavior. She gestured toward Jake, who looked surprised but stood up obediently. Jake Richardson is Ms. Richardson's brother and can provide first-hand testimony about her psychological state. My world stopped spinning as I realized Amanda's masterstroke. She was going to have Jake testify against me using his drug-induced memories and programmed responses to destroy my credibility in front of the entire board. Jake, Amanda prompted gently, can you tell the board about your sister's recent behavior? Jake looked at me across the conference table, his eyes clouded with confusion and artificial memories. For a moment, I hoped he might recognize the truth, might remember who I really was and what I'd actually accomplished. Instead, he cleared his throat and began speaking in a voice I didn't recognize. My sister has always struggled with jealousy and mental health issues. He said, each word hitting me like a physical blow. She's never been able to accept that other people might be more successful than her. The board members shifted uncomfortably as Jake continued his programmed testimony describing a version of me that existed only in Amanda's manufactured reality. She lives in government housing and works odd jobs, but she's always pretended to be more important than she really is. When I told her about my engagement to Amanda, she became violently jealous. I wanted to scream to show them my corporate records to prove that everything Jake was saying was a drug-induced delusion. But Amanda had anticipated that response too. The recent attack happened because I tried to set boundaries about her inappropriate behavior toward Amanda, Jake continued. She couldn't accept that someone she considered beneath our family would actually be more successful than her. The final twist of the knife was perfect in its cruelty. Amanda was using Jake to accuse me of the exact classist snobbery that she had actually exploited in him. "Thank you, Jake," Amanda said softly, placing a protective hand on his arm. "I know this is difficult for you." She turned back to the board with an expression of professional concern mixed with personal sympathy. Meridian Corporation believes that Richardson Holdings has significant value, but only under stable leadership. We're prepared to maintain all current employees and operations under new management that doesn't carry the personal baggage that has clearly compromised current decision-making. Board member Sarah Williams leaned forward with obvious skepticism. "Ms. Patterson, this is an extremely unusual presentation for a corporate acquisition. Are you suggesting we should approve a takeover based on personal family dynamics?" "I'm suggesting," Amanda replied smoothly, "that leadership stability is fundamental to shareholder value. Would you invest in a company led by someone with documented psychological issues and a history of violent behavior toward family members?" The room fell silent as board members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the personal nature of Amanda's attack, but unable to dismiss the documented evidence she'd presented. I realized this was my moment to respond, to defend myself and expose Amanda's manipulation. But as I started to stand up, Jake suddenly doubled over in his chair, gasping for breath and clutching his chest. "Jake!" Amanda screamed with perfect theatrical panic. "Someone call an ambulance!" As my brother collapsed unconscious on the conference room floor, Amanda looked directly at me with a smile that lasted exactly 1 second before transforming back into worried concern. She'd just triggered Jake's medical emergency to prevent me from defending myself, and she wanted me to know it was intentional. The conference room erupted into chaos as Jake convulsed on the marble floor, his body seizing violently while foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. Amanda dropped to her knees beside him, performing what appeared to be life-saving first aid while screaming for someone to call 911. "He's having some kind of allergic reaction," she sobbed convincingly, cradling Jake's head in her lap. This has never happened before. But I'd watched enough of Marcus's surveillance footage to recognize the symptoms of benzodiazepine overdose combined with steroid toxicity. Amanda had deliberately triggered Jake's collapse by increasing his medication to dangerous levels, timing it perfectly to prevent my defense and cast me as the villain who'd caused her fiancé's medical emergency. "Everyone step back," Amanda commanded as paramedics rushed into the boardroom. "He needs space to breathe." While EMTs worked to stabilize Jake's vital signs, Amanda pulled one of the lead paramedics aside for a whispered conversation. I couldn't hear her exact words, but I caught fragments that made my blood run cold. Family stress. Sister has been threatening him. Found this near her chair. Amanda produced a small glass vial from her purse, holding it carefully with a tissue to preserve fingerprints. The clear liquid inside could have been anything but her performance, suggested it was some kind of poison that explained Jake's sudden collapse. "Officers," Amanda called to the police who'd followed the ambulance. "I think we have a serious problem here." Detective Maria Santos approached Amanda with professional caution, clearly trying to assess whether this was a medical emergency or a crime scene. "Ms. Patterson, can you explain what happened?" "We were in the middle of a business presentation when Jake suddenly started having convulsions," Amanda explained tearfully. "I found this vial on the floor near his sister's chair. I think she might have put something in his water." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas, and I watched board members recoil from me as if I'd already been convicted. Amanda's performance was flawless, the concerned fiancé discovering evidence of attempted murder by a jealous sister with documented mental health issues. Ms. Richardson, Detective Santos addressed me with obvious suspicion. I need to ask you some questions about your relationship with the victim. He's not a victim. He's my brother, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. And I didn't poison him. That woman has been drugging him for months. Ma'am, that's a very serious accusation. It's also completely fabricated, Amanda interjected with perfect timing. Detective Randy has been stalking and threatening me for weeks. She attacked Jake in a restaurant in Nebraska just 3 days ago. There are police reports documenting her violent behavior. Detective Santos looked at me with the expression of someone who'd seen too many domestic violence cases involving unstable family members. The evidence Amanda had manufactured was overwhelming. Documented history of violence, witness testimony, physical evidence, and now an apparent poisoning attempt. Ms. Richardson, I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning. Wait, I said desperately. Before you arrest me, I need to show you something. I pulled out my phone, queuing up the recordings Marcus had obtained of Amanda discussing her manipulation strategy. This is Amanda's voice recorded in her office describing how she's been drugging my brother. But as I pressed play, Amanda's voice filled the room with a completely different conversation. Randy has been making threats against me for weeks. I'm genuinely afraid for my safety. Jake tries to protect me, but his sister becomes more unstable every day. The recording had been altered. Somehow, Amanda had anticipated that I'd have surveillance evidence and prepared counterfeit audio that supported her narrative instead of exposing it. Detective Amanda said with convincing fear, "She's been doctoring recordings to make it sound like I said things I never said. This is exactly the kind of psychological manipulation Jake warned me about." I stared at my phone in disbelief, watching my last piece of evidence transform into further proof of my guilt. Amanda had thought of everything, anticipated every possible defense, and prepared countermeasures that made me look increasingly desperate and delusional. "Ms. Richardson, please come with me," Detective Santos repeated, this time with authority that brooked no argument. As security guards escorted me out of my own boardroom, I caught Amanda's eye one final time. She was still kneeling beside Jake's stretcher, playing the role of devoted fiancée, but her expression when she looked at me was pure triumph. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she whispered as I passed, echoing the same words she'd used during our phone conversation weeks earlier. The elevator doors closed on the sight of my brother being wheeled away unconscious, while the board members who'd once trusted my leadership watched me being removed in handcuffs. But as we descended toward the lobby, my phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "Emergency evidence package delivered to FBI. They're moving now." Through the elevator's glass walls, I could see black SUVs pulling up to the building's entrance, FBI agents stepping out with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested a major federal operation. Amanda had been so focused on destroying me that she hadn't noticed Marcus Chen's team documenting everything she'd done over the past 6 months. While she'd been manufacturing evidence against me, federal investigators had been building a case against her for corporate espionage, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The elevator stopped at the 20th floor instead of the lobby, and Detective Santos received a call that made her expression change completely. "Ms. Richardson," she said after hanging up, "there's been a development. Federal agents need to speak with you about this case." As we walked back toward my boardroom, I could hear Amanda's voice becoming increasingly shrill through the closed doors, no longer the composed corporate attorney, but someone who just realized her perfect plan was unraveling in real time. "This is ridiculous," Amanda was shouting. "These charges are completely fabricated. I'm a respected attorney with Sullivan and Cromwell." Special Agent Jennifer Walsh of the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division met us in the hallway, her expression grim but professional. "Ms. Richardson, we need your cooperation in a federal investigation into corporate espionage and conspiracy. We have reason to believe you and your brother are victims of an elaborate fraud." Through the boardroom's glass walls, I could see Amanda being read her rights, while other agents secured evidence from the presentation materials she'd so carefully prepared. Her perfect mask had finally slipped, revealing the calculating predator underneath. But my eyes were on Jake, who was conscious now and staring around the room with growing confusion, as federal agents explained that his fiancée was not who she'd claimed to be. "Randy," he called out weakly, his voice cutting through the chaos of the arrest. "I don't understand what's happening. I can't remember." For the first time in months, Jake's voice sounded like my brother instead of Amanda's puppet. Whatever drugs she'd been giving him were finally wearing off, allowing his real personality to emerge from the chemical fog. "It's okay," I called back through the glass. "Everything's going to be okay now." Amanda looked at me one final time as agents led her away in handcuffs, her blue eyes filled with the kind of rage that comes from a perfect plan, destroyed at the moment of victory. "This isn't over," she snarled, dropping her composed facade completely. "You have no idea what you've started." But it was over. After months of manipulation, drugging, and psychological warfare, Amanda Kellerman's career as a corporate assassin had finally ended. Now I just had to figure out how to rebuild a relationship with the brother she'd nearly destroyed in her quest to destroy me. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan had never felt as welcoming as it did 6 months later, when Amanda Kellerman received her sentence 25 years in federal prison for conspiracy, corporate espionage, attempted murder, and fraud. I sat in the gallery beside Jake, watching justice finally being served for crimes that had nearly destroyed both our lives. The defendant's actions represent a calculated assault on the fundamental trust that underlies both family relationships and corporate governance, Judge Patricia Morrison declared from the bench. Ms. Kellerman systematically exploited the victim's love for his sister to commit acts of corporate terrorism that endangered lives and livelihoods. Jake squeezed my hand as Amanda was led away in handcuffs, her expensive attorney clothes replaced by orange prison garb. She'd tried every legal maneuver possible to avoid responsibility, but Marcus Chen's surveillance evidence had been overwhelming. Audio recordings, video footage, financial records, and medical documentation painted an undeniable picture of premeditated destruction. During the months leading up to the trial, Jake had undergone extensive medical treatment to recover from the drug dependency Amanda had created. The combination of Ativan and anabolic steroids had caused significant damage to his liver and cardiovascular system, requiring months of careful detoxification and rehabilitation. But the psychological healing had taken even longer. "I still have nightmares about things I said to you," Jake had told me during one of our weekly therapy sessions. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the family counselor we'd been working with, had explained that Jake was suffering from a unique form of trauma, knowing that his mind had been weaponized against someone he loved. "The guilt isn't rational," Dr. Harper had explained during one session. Jake's actions were not his own choice. Amanda Kellerman essentially turned him into an involuntary weapon against his sister. The FBI investigation had revealed the scope of Amanda's operations. She wasn't working alone. She was part of a sophisticated network of corporate lawyers who specialized in targeted takedowns of family-owned businesses. Over 7 years, her organization had destroyed 12 companies worth a combined $4 billion, always using romantic manipulation of male family members as their primary weapon. 3 men from previous cases had committed suicide when they realized how they'd been used. 2 others had suffered complete psychological breakdowns and remained in psychiatric facilities. Jake had been lucky. His physical youth and the intervention of federal authorities had saved him from permanent damage. Meridian Corporation faced its own reckoning. CEO Marcus Webb received 15 years for conspiracy and fraud, while the company itself paid $200 million in fines and restitution to the families Amanda's network had destroyed. Sullivan and Cromwell fired 17 attorneys who'd been complicit in the scheme, fundamentally restructuring their corporate governance to prevent future infiltration. But the most important healing happened away from courtrooms and corporate boardrooms. "I remember the day you left for college," Jake said as we sat in our old corner booth at the Rusty Anchor exactly 1 year after Amanda's sentencing. I cried for 3 hours because I knew you were the smartest person in our family and we were losing you. The restaurant had become our monthly tradition, a place where we could talk honestly about the past without the weight of our professional identities complicating every conversation. I always thought you resented me for being successful. I admitted, stirring cream into my coffee. I did, but not for the reasons you think. Jake looked out the window at the familiar Nebraska landscape, gathering courage for the conversation we'd been avoiding for decades. I resented you because you succeeded despite everything our family put you through. Dad leaving Mom working all the time, me getting all the attention and resources. You should have failed, and instead you built an empire. I succeeded because of what our family put me through, not despite it. Being homeless taught me that I never wanted to depend on anyone else for my survival ever again. And I succeeded because everything was handed to me, which made me feel like a fraud every single day. When Amanda told me she was impressed by my family values and humble background, it was the first time someone had made my connection to you sound like a positive thing instead of an embarrassment. We'd had versions of this conversation many times over the past year, slowly unpacking decades of misunderstanding and resentment that Amanda had exploited so effectively. Dr. Harper had explained that healthy families often struggle with success disparities. Amanda had simply weaponized normal sibling dynamics for criminal purposes. Jake, I need you to know something, I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. Everything I built, every company I acquired, every deal I closed, I did it partly because I wanted to prove to you that our family wasn't something to be ashamed of. And I spent years being ashamed of our family because I thought that was the only way to be worthy of your success. The irony was devastating. We'd both been trying to prove our worth to each other while believing the other person looked down on us. What are we now? Jake asked the question that had hung between us for months. We're family, I said simply. Damaged, complicated, but real family. Jake had changed careers after the trial, leaving corporate law to become a victim advocate for families targeted by economic crimes. His work with the FBI's white-collar crime division had helped identify and prosecute 3 other corporate manipulation networks, saving dozens of families from the destruction Amanda had planned for us. Richardson Holdings had emerged stronger from the crisis. Our stock price had actually increased when investors realized we'd successfully defended against a sophisticated attack. The publicity around Amanda's trial had generated new business opportunities as other companies sought security consulting from a firm that had survived corporate espionage. But the most meaningful change was personal. Jake had met Beth Williams, a high school teacher from Nebraska, during his recovery process. She knew our entire story, understood the complexity of our family dynamics, and loved Jake for who he was becoming, rather than who he'd pretended to be. Beth wants to meet you properly, Jake said, pulling out his phone to show me pictures from their engagement party. Not as the CEO of Richardson Holdings, but as her fiancée's sister who survived something terrible with him. The photographs showed Jake looking healthy and genuinely happy for the first time in years. Beth was a pretty brunette, with kind eyes and a smile that reached all the way to her soul, everything Amanda had pretended to be, but never was. I'd love to meet her, I said honestly. And Jake, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not for your career or your success, but for choosing to heal instead of staying broken. I couldn't have healed without you refusing to give up on me even when I was trying to destroy you. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Nebraska sunset paint the sky in familiar colors that reminded us both of childhood evenings when the future seemed infinite and family meant safety instead of complication. Randy, Jake said eventually, what did you learn from all this? I thought about Amanda's final words in the courthouse, her promise that our conflict wasn't over even as she faced decades in prison. I thought about the other families who hadn't been as lucky as us, who'd lost everything to manipulation and betrayal. I thought about the companies that had been destroyed, the lives that had been ruined, the trust that had been shattered. But mostly I thought about my brother sitting across from me in a diner booth, healthy and whole and choosing forgiveness over resentment. I learned that the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, I said slowly. It's saving the people you love from becoming weapons against themselves. Jake smiled, the first completely genuine smile I'd seen from him since before Amanda entered our lives. I learned that family isn't about being perfect, he replied. It's about being real enough with each other to survive anything. Outside, the rusty anchor Nebraska stretched endlessly in all directions, the same landscape that had shaped us both, but no longer defined our limitations. We'd survived corporate espionage, psychological manipulation, and the weaponization of our own family bonds. But most importantly, we'd survived each other. Richardson Holdings continued to thrive under my leadership, now protected by security measures that made corporate infiltration nearly impossible. The Richardson Family Foundation had helped 57 families recover from economic crimes, providing both financial assistance and psychological support for victims of corporate manipulation. And every month, Jake and I met at the Rusty Anchor to remember that success means nothing without people to share it with, and family means everything when it's built on truth instead of shame. The woman who'd tried to destroy us was locked away for the rest of her productive life, but we were free to build whatever future we chose. Together. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and protecting yourself from their harmful behavior? How do you balance loyalty to family with setting healthy boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar difficult choices. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding strength in unexpected places. And don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's possible to rebuild trust after even the deepest betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones worth fighting hardest to save. I hope you find the courage to protect both yourself and the people you love, even when those two goals seem impossible to balance. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.